rising tensions between Egypt and Ethiopia over the grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam be solved without a military escalation ahead of Ethiopia's second filling of the dam this summer. What is it exactly that Ethiopia and Egypt are sparring over at a time of the pandemic? Where did it go wrong? Is it only a dispute over water sharing? Why can't Ethiopia and Egypt reach an agreement to solve the crisis? Why is Ethiopia rejecting calls to involve mediators while Sudan asks the UN Security Council to meet over the dispute? As a matter of concern to 11 basin nations, how will these nations react to the escalation? While Ethiopia is saying that Egypt and Sudan are politicizing the negotiations and turning it into an Arab issue, adding that it is an African issue. But is it only an African issue? And should the international community intervene to solve the crisis? We'll answer all these questions by looking beyond the edge. Let's get started with a brief history about this recurring source of tension.
The Nile River is Egypt's eternal lifeline. The outstanding dispute currently putting Cairo and Addis Ababa at loggerheads concerns the distribution of its vital waters. Annual flow through Egypt's Aswan Dam continues at around 97 cubic kilometers, while that figure is much greater than the average of 84 cubic kilometers that flows through Sudan. Of the latter amount, 75% goes to Egypt, while Sudan's share stands at 25%. Yet the distribution of water is not concerned just to Egypt and Sudan, but 11 Nile Basin countries. To this day, no inclusive framework has emerged that at once governs the management and sharing of Nile water, except an ill-fated initiative in 2011, which failed because of the rejection of Egypt and Sudan. If history has any relevance, two anachronistic treaties from 1929 and 1959 are worth noting. Egypt's long-standing claim of a historical right over the Nile, which the Arab League echoed in its recent expression of camaraderie to Cairo, stems from these colonial-era pacts. The first of these laid down the earliest legal ground, presenting the entire Nile as an exclusive property of Egypt and Sudan, then British colonies. The legally unfettered access apportioned 48 cubic kilometers of the waters to Egypt and 4 cubic kilometers to Sudan. All exclusive rights over the waters of the Nile were stipulated in previous agreements. Now independent states, Egypt and Sudan once again fully allocated the Nile's flow amongst themselves. The 1959 agreement over the Nile re-granted the lion's share of the water, which amounts to 55.5 cubic kilometers, once again to Egypt. Sudan agreed some 18.5 cubic kilometers, representing a significant increment from 1929. The Khartoum-Cairo deal understandably drew the ire of other riparian states. They denounced the pact as exclusionary and obsolete at once, and thus see them as invalid. The Nile Basin Initiative, an organization they established, is a substantial move the countries undertook that made any such legal tool a thing of the past. Many commentators agree that the question of equity among the waters of the Nile ideally ought to involve all 11 sovereign states. Therefore, Ethiopia and Egypt are not the only states party to the dispute. The issue has come back to light recently due to Ethiopia's decision to plough ahead with its Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam project, otherwise known as the GERD. Indeed, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam does not constitute the kernel of the current hostile rhetoric and ever-escalating tension over waters that goes back to these colonial decisions. In March 2015, Ethiopia, Sudan and Egypt convened to ink an important document dubbed the Declaration of Principles. The accord furnished Egyptian consensus for the building of the dam, marking quite a smooth transition into a post-dam construction era of series of bargaining. The agreement admirably attributed the dam inter alia to the shared value manifested in promoting transboundary cooperation and regional integration through generating power. In addition to this, the agreement emphasized the understanding that downstream countries would be given priority to purchase electricity generated from the GERD. The Ethiopian government seeks to show its determination to finish the building phase of the project and commence generating power with its speedy development. However, now, downstream nations are concerned over how their flow will be affected. The best case scenario is that if all parties could get back to the negotiating table and come to a quick agreement, though current tensions are spilling over into tough talk from diplomats.
On today's programme, we've got several guests. I'm joined in the studio by Isaac Eshetu, who's an Ethiopian activist and journalist and content creator at the platform Talk Ethiopia. Isaac, welcome to The Edge.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
And joining us live from Hawassa in Ethiopia is Bereket Moges, who's an Ethiopian politician and analyst, PhD fellow from Hawassa University. Bereket, welcome to The Edge again. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to see you again.
And also from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, we're joined by Dr. Mohammed Hafiz, who's Professor of Dam and Geotechnical Engineering and an expert on civil engineering in Kuala Lumpur. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you for inviting me.
Before we begin our discussion, let's have a look at an infographic. The 1.8-kilometre long Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is being built up by an Italian company. This infographic has more technical facts about the dam. So let's get started on this subject, the Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia. Isaac, could you explain to us why is this dam so important?
Thank you for the chance. I mean, this dam is very important for Ethiopia because Ethiopia is a country of 120 million people, 65 million of which have no access to electricity. And it's also a country affected by drought and other problems in the country. And to bring electricity to these people and also support the economic growth plan that Ethiopia has, it's very, very important for Ethiopia to build a dam so that it could manage all these things. And I would like to mention the fact that out of the Nile basin countries, Ethiopia actually constitutes 40% of the whole population of the basin countries. That's 11 countries, and Ethiopian population represents 40% of that population. And at the same time, Ethiopia represents 86% of the contribution of the Nile water, which in turn is a huge number, and sometimes in the summer it becomes 96%. So Ethiopia is a huge contributor to the water of the Nile, but all up to this time, Ethiopia has never benefited from this huge water resource in the country. And it actually represents 70% of the water resource available in the country. And we have not been able to make use of that. And it's very acceptable internationally, morally, politically, for a country to utilize 70% of its own water resource and use it to the betterment of the life of its citizens and bring electricity to more than 65 million people. And that's what we're trying to do, basically.
So looking for the economic benefits from the resource whilst taking advantage of it. Yeah. Barakat, right now in Ethiopia, there are elections going on. How important is the situation of the dam at this moment to the politics of Ethiopia?
Thank you very much for having me. I think one of the main issues that we have been dealing with in Ethiopia about our dam is the security of the dam itself, because we have been in election and then it has been really very challenging for us because everywhere with Sudan, with issues in north and issues around Benshangul Gums, we have been in a really very serious condition. But after the election has been concluded peacefully, now we are aiming that Ethiopia still is a strong East African country and then united, and then we are hoping that peace will be the major issue now. Even we are working on Gerard very specifically, improving its capacity and then finalizing the project. I think it is really important, and the ruling party also used this issue in its politics to make sure the people have trust in the government.
So both economically and politically, this dam is a very important project for securing peace in the region.
Yes.
Is that right?
Sure.
So it's the way forward. Dr. Hafiz, let me come to you from the perspective of the dam. This project obviously is going to bring huge benefits to Ethiopia. And as Isaac has just mentioned, is going to enable electricity to supply to people who currently don't have electricity. It's going to provide other benefits for Ethiopia. But there are at the same time issues contrary to that. Well, what are your thoughts?
All right. First, thank you for inviting me. And I just want to correct some information which was displayed just now in the video. The video mentioned that the dam will produce around 6,450 megawatt, but in reality, recently or almost 6 months ago, Ethiopia government itself has reduced the capacity of the dam to 5,150 megawatt. The reason is they have found out that the dam was over-designed. So the problem here is over-design. Egypt are not objecting the building of the Ethiopian dam. Egypt is objecting the over-design. So Egypt has already agreed with Ethiopia during 2008 until 2010 to build a small dam with a capacity of 14 billion cubic meter. Well, but during the Egyptian revolution, suddenly we found out that Ethiopia is building a different dam. It's 24 billion cubic meter capacity. So this is a key issue. Why Ethiopia has changed the initial design from 14 billion, which Egypt has accepted. So on principle, Egypt is not stopping Ethiopia from developing. Egypt is not want to go against Ethiopia interest. No, we have approved it and we have agreed on that on base win-to-win. Ethiopia generates electricity and at the same time doesn't block the water to Egypt and Sudan. But when they over-design it and they change from 14 to 24, here is a problem starting. So the issue is not building a dam. The issue is over-design of the dam.
And what does that mean for Egypt, this over-design?
Of course, that will cause big problem to Egypt. Would actually every cubic meter stored in Ethiopian dam, it will deduct from the Nasser Lake, because we depend mainly on the water coming from Ethiopia to fill up the Nasser Lake. So when you store 74 billion cubic meter at the Ethiopian dam, plus the losses, the geological losses and the evaporation and all this, will reach to 100 billion cubic meter. So this 100 billion cubic meter should has reached to the Nasser Lake, but we, because of the dam, it will be stored in Ethiopian dam. Then the Nasser Lake level will start drop gradually until reach to the dead storage, where there's no water for the Egyptian to drink and to irrigate their farms.
Please,
I'd like to add a few points on that. I think Dr. Hafiz made it look like a conflict that just started recently. This is not the problem between Egypt and Ethiopia. Ethiopian government is not something that just came with the alleged redesign or something similar to that. The biggest problem that we have had is Egyptian governments have clinged to colonial era agreements of 1959, and they want to maximize the usage of the Nile, and they want to be the sole owners of the Nile. They have historically enjoyed from a veto power over the construction of any kind of dam, while the Nile actually passes through 11 countries. It was only Egypt that had veto power over this. And this historical injustice based on colonial agreements that Ethiopia was not part of is very unequivocally rejected, and we're not even part of it. And this actually, the 1959 agreement allocates 66% of the water to Egypt and 22% to Sudan. And the rest of the 12% goes to evaporation, which is completely unjust. And no country in the world would accept such a deal, which we were not even a part of in the first place. And for years, Egyptian governments have tried to push for this water hegemony, trying to stop any type of benefit when it comes to Ethiopia, while Ethiopia contributes to more than 86% of the water itself. It's highly immoral and very unacceptable for any country to claim that a country cannot utilize a water resource that it contributes 86%. This has never been acceptable. This is what we've been discussing. For example, we could talk about the Nile Basin Initiative that was signed in 1999. We could talk about the Cooperative Framework Agreement in 2010, to which Egypt and Sudan failed to agree to. These were agreements based on equitable share, where the countries involved in the basin tried to come together to work out a plan so that the water could be beneficial to all. But Egypt and Sudan failed to agree with this because basically they had a problem with Article 4, which deals with equitable sharing of the water. So Egyptian government have refused to share the water of Nile, and that is the main problem. Suggesting that a country should stick to a 1959 colonial agreement, which Ethiopia has not signed itself, and that has been the biggest problem that have been hampering this huge process to which Egypt has been stalling, trying to make it go away, trying to make sure that it gets to never be built, and this is not acceptable.
Let's give Mohammed a chance to respond to that.
Okay, I think our friend from Ethiopia, he has missed many facts. First, 1959 was not a colonial agreement. It was between Egypt, a free country, and Sudan, a free country. Both were not occupied at that time. So it is not colonial agreement. Secondly, the agreement which give veto to Egypt, not agreement 1959, but the agreement 1902, which you don't want to talk about it. 1902, it is an agreement signed between Egypt and Sudan as one country under the British occupation, with Ethiopia, which at that time was not occupied. It was ruled by a king, Ethiopian king. His name is Menelik II, I think. So that is an agreement which gives Egypt the veto right, not 1995, 59, sorry. So this is 1902. This is a basic agreement which gives Egypt and Sudan the right for veto any dam to be built on the Blue Nile. And it does not come from the air. No, we have paid for it. Egypt and Sudan has gave Ethiopia one big state called Bani Shankul. And that state is a Arabic land from Sudan, from the Sudan, giving as a gift to the king of Ethiopia as an advance to make sure that he will not build any dam on the Blue Nile to deprive Egypt and Sudan from the Nile. So the agreement which gives the veto is not 1995, but it is 1902. All right. Secondly, when you say Egypt is controlling all the water of the Nile, it's not true, because the Blue Nile Basin every year receives almost 450 billion cubic meter. All this water goes to Ethiopia in terms of groundwater, in terms of irrigation. Only a very little amount of water, which is a surface water, goes to the Sudan border, which is around 48 billion cubic meter in average per year. So saying that Egypt is controlling all the Blue Nile water is not fact. You are controlling 400 cubic meter, and we only get 50 billion cubic meter. So I just want to correct the information for my Ethiopian friend.
Well, shall we go on to Bereket? Bereket.
I think, I think my friend from Egypt, I think he's misunderstanding what Isaac would try to say. When he says it is an agreement of occupation by British, it is a continuation of 1902, 1929, and then 1954, a continuation. And then Egypt, there is no way that an agreement which happened between countries who has been in a colony by British, and then a country is free, which does not agree to give a veto power to Egypt, never signed such type of agreement which says does not block water to flow. We are not blocking the water to flow to Egypt. We are trying to save small amount of water, which is very little amount of water, which is not around even 10% per year, and then which could be reserved 74 billion cubic water within 7 to 10 years. And Egypt's problem is just they consider that Ethiopia should not build the dam. This is the first consideration that they have in mind. The second one is they didn't believe that we can build the dam. I mean, these huge dams, which is the biggest dam in Africa, when we start building it, especially the last 3 years, they have gone to everywhere to stop it, everywhere in the world, and everywhere in Africa. So why? Now, at this moment, while I'm talking to you, Ethiopia is already started filling the dam. Every day, 0.13 meters of water is filled every day. Is there any shortage in Egypt? I want my friend to answer this. Is there any shortage in the Lake Nasser that you are mentioning by this time? Because Ethiopia already planned to fill the dam between June, July, and August. Is there any shortage by this time? I'm sure, quite sure that there is no shortage. Why are they crying then? They are crying because Ethiopia is going to develop herself to get electricity for the rest of 65% of its people, where this dam is going to give the same service that your Aswan Dam gives to Egypt. just giving electricity to the country, and then the water flow continues as a normal flow. And then it also helps Egypt's water to be saved in Ethiopia, the 12% which is evaporated every year when it is reserved in Egypt could be saved if it is reserved in Ethiopia. Why is all this fighting coming to Ethiopia when they know? You are a technical guy, you are working in engineering, you are, you know everything, and then there is no any problem in the technique because the international panels of technical people have approved the dam is in a good status, and then it's very strong. It's very helpful for the downstream countries. Why only Egypt is crying like it is going to destroy or just bring a drought to Egyptian? Because we save 10% of the water every year.
You've asked several questions. Is the flow of water actually reducing the amount of supply to Egypt at this time? And what is the concern? Mohammed Hafiz.
Of course, I agree with my friend from Ethiopia. There is no significant harm now in the year 2020, 2021, 2023, 2024. Whatever amount of water stored at the Ethiopian dam will not cause a significant harm to the Egyptian or to Egypt as a state. Why? Because we have a reservoir in Nasser Lake, which we will start using it gradually. So when Ethiopia has completed filling the dam, our Egyptian lake, Nasser Lake, will reach to almost to the dead storage. There is no water for the people. So when you say you are filling today and Egypt has no losses or is not suffering, yes, I agree with you. But because for the coming 3-4 years, the Egyptian will not directly feel the harm of the Ethiopian dam. But after 4 years from now, when the storage in Nasser Lake reach to the dead storage and no water coming from the lake, then the Egyptian will die one by one. So you are giving some information which maybe is okay. I agree with you on the short term, on the 3-4 years from now. But what after 2024? There is no enough water in the Lake Nasser to support the Egyptian people. All right. So saying that the Ethiopian dam will not harm the Egyptian people, I don't think it's true.
Well, we'll come.
You didn't understand my question, my brother. I said, is there any shortage in the flow of the water, not in the reservoir? Now the normal flow is in the same level. That the increase of the water because of the rain, we have, tremendous water amount now coming from Ethiopia.
Dr. Habib, is there a reduction in the flow?
We cannot say anything now because actually the flood hasn't started yet. All right. When you talk, we don't talk about the flow. We talk about the total amount reached to the Nasser Lake per year after the flood. So of course, Ethiopia for the second filling, we won't be able to store much water. They will store less than 2 billion cubic meters. It won't have much effect on the Egyptian because these 2 billion cubic meter can be easily taken from the Lake Nasser. So this year, Egyptian will not feel any harm. Next year also, I assure my Ethiopian friend, we won't feel any harm. But on the long term, we will have a very significant harm, especially if during this coming few years, if Ethiopia or the Blue Nile went in drought, we might have drought next year for
so
2-3 years.
The uncertainties of the future remain. Dr. Hafiz, I know that your time is very limited. Thank you so much for joining us here today on The Edge.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Isaac, we'll come back. Barakat, we'll be back in a moment. Let's have a look at this video together. The Sudanese foreign minister has called for UN officials to hold session over Ethiopia's plans to develop the country's controversial Renaissance Dam.
Sudan has asked the United Nations Security Council to meet and discuss the dispute over the giant dam being built by Ethiopia along the Blue Nile. Ethiopia is pinning its hopes of economic development and power generation on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, while the two downstream countries, Egypt and Sudan, are concerned about it and are seeking a binding agreement on the filling and operation of the dam. Egypt relies on the Nile River for as much as 90% of its fresh water and sees the dam as an existential threat, while Sudan is concerned about the operation of its own Nile dams and water stations. Sudan's foreign minister called on the Security Council to hold a session as soon as possible to discuss the GERD and its impact on the safety and security of millions of people. Sudan and Egypt had already agreed this month to work together on all levels to push Ethiopia to negotiate seriously on the agreement, after African Union-sponsored talks remained deadlocked. Earlier this month, Arab states called on the Security Council to discuss and dispute Ethiopia's plans to go ahead with the second filling of the dam this summer, even without an agreement with Sudan and Egypt.
ما هو دور مجلس الأمن؟ هو لا يحيل الأمر فقط على مجلس الأمن، والرسالة المصرية والسودانية كانت واضحة بأن مجلس الأمن يتحمل مسؤولياته، ولكن بيطالب في القرار بعقد جلسة وبشكل عاجل لمناقشة هذا الوضع.
Ethiopia previously rejected calls from Egypt and Sudan to involve mediators outside the African Union. Sudan said earlier in June that it was open to a partial interim agreement on the multi-billion-dollar dam with specific conditions.
So we're back in the studio. I'm also joined in the studio by Isaac Eshatu and Barakat Moges is still with me. They're both Ethiopian, and also joined live from Washington, D.C. by Mokhtar Kamal, who's a political analyst. Mokhtar, thank you for joining us. We're having a lively discussion about the dam already. We've been discussing some of the history of the dam and some of the agreements that have been made, as well as the disagreements about the effects of the dam. From your perspective, how do you see the role of the Renaissance Dam, and do you see effects on the Nile Delta?
I didn't hear your question quite well, but it seems that you are asking if there are negative effects on the Nile Delta in Egypt because of the project. Absolutely, yes. I'm not a specialist. Maybe there are people who would be able to talk about that much better than I, but what I know is that the dam, the mere fact with the size of the dam and the size of the water that should be stored in the dam, it always threatens Egypt of drought. And for the Delta, not only drought, but also it leaves a way for salted water to just kind of pollute the Delta water, the water in the mud there. And that's very serious for the Egyptian economy, for Egyptian life in general. And that's in brief what I feel, and I mean, not just what I feel, but what reports are saying about this. In fact, from an Egyptian perspective, this thing is a catastrophe for Egypt.
Isaac.
I beg to differ. It's not actually an existential threat. I know Egyptian governments like to show this as an existential threat, but it is not. It's actually, the dam is actually a beneficial project. The dam by itself, it's an electric dam, so it's a non-consumptive type of dam. That means it's not going to benefit anyone when you hold the water. You just fill the water and you just release it so that you could make electricity. So the Egyptian governments have chosen the way of to maintain the water hegemony over the Nile. They've been pushing this agenda which says Ethiopia wants to thirst Egypt, and if this dam actually goes into action, the Egyptians are going to die, and people are going to die. But this is actually one of the big problems that we have had over the years, because this is actually stopping the Egyptian governments from mitigating these problems in a fair manner. For example, the way that the Egyptian governments and authorities understand significant harm is very problematic. So they connect this with the historical right that they have had. And they say, because throughout history we have had this much billion cubic meters of water, then if that actually goes down in any way, that constitutes significant harm. But that is not how the international law actually understands this. When water that has never been shared by anyone start to be shared, of course, there is going to be some type of effect. But this dam at the same time is going to solve the problem of flood, which actually haunts Sudan and Egypt for many years. It's going to decrease the evaporation rate of the water. It's also going to decrease the silt of the water. These are very huge problems on the Nile Basin. But this, you see, when issues of drought come, these are burdens that all the basin countries have to share. It's not a burden that Ethiopia has to share. We have drought in Ethiopia, and more than according to the UN, more than 22 million people live under the poverty line. And drought is a huge problem in Ethiopia. Why should we be the only ones taking this burden while contributing to more than 86% of the Nile waters? This is not acceptable. And actually, this has stopped the Egyptian governments from moving out of the comfort zones and trying to mitigate these problems. The Nile is not the only source of fresh water of Egypt. Egypt has access to, for example, underground and seawater, which could be utilized. But because they are not willing to go out of their comfort zone and to accommodate the fact that they're going to be sharing the water of the Nile, it has stopped them from mitigating them in fair ways. For example, in Nubian sandstone aquifer system, NSAS contains an estimated of 150 million cubic kilometers of water, which some professionals actually say this is enough for 500 years for Egypt. Egypt could use that. Egypt has access to two seas, the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea. They could have desalination of water is becoming a very cost-effective method. They could mitigate that. They have access to this, but Ethiopia is a landlocked country. It does not have enough underground water that it can use. That's why we have to use this. We're living in the dark. I would like to ask the Egyptian gentlemen, how would you feel if you had to live in the dark? What does it sound like? Imagine we didn't have lights. That's how more than 66 million people in Ethiopia live, and this is not acceptable. We have to have some type of arrangement, even though Egyptian governments have always refused to have a water sharing arrangement. I would like to ask the gentleman here, how much % of the Nile water do you think Ethiopia deserves? I would like some kind of number, because Egyptian governments do not think that Ethiopia deserves any part of this water that it contributes 86% to, which is not acceptable.
Well, let's ask Mokhtar. Does Ethiopia deserve to keep any of the water, or are these projects in fact just using the water as it flows through the country? And can Egypt find other sources of water?
Of course, the Ethiopian people, as African people, they deserve every opportunity possible in order to maximize their development potential. But this is really not the issue. I mean, it's a kind of camouflaging the real thing. First of all, I would like to remind our Ethiopian friend that the government of Mr. Sisi was the best ally of the government of Mr. Abiy Ahmed. In 2015, the Egyptian government and Mr. Sisi, who does not represent the Egyptian people, have opted unilaterally to give credence and to approve the project of the dam without any reliable negotiations in advance. That's number one. Number two, the Egyptian government can, of course, use other methods and could have used other methods in addition to the international law, i.e. Military power and stuff like this. The Egyptian government doesn't do that. Number three, the fact is clear that there is a campaign in Ethiopia that is really sowing the seeds of enmity between the two people. People are two African people, by the way. I mean, regardless of the history in between the two peoples, but by the end, I mean, these are people who are African. These are people who are on the Nile. Concerning the electricity generation, there are many other ways to generate electricity, such as from sun energy and stuff like this. And there could have been arrangements with the Egyptian government for that. So it's quite clear. I mean, we can debate the technicalities of the dam and the water. And yeah, I agree on one point, which is that the Egyptian government was not very efficient in using the Nile water. However, saying that we the Egyptian government or we Egyptians can desalinate seawater, that's extremely expensive. Finally, in conclusion, it's quite obvious that this is a geopolitical issue rather than it's an issue of development and a disagreement between two African people concerning that. Who is supporting this dam and supporting increasing the size and the height of the dam like 2 to 3 times relative to the original plan? It's Israel, a declared enemy of Egypt. It is some Arab money, stooges of Israel and other Western capitals, and even the government, the Ethiopian government itself, being threatened, the government of Mr. Abiy Ahmed, being threatened by a lot of internal strife. It wants to make this a national issue at the expense of sowing the seeds of enmity in between the two people. Both Egyptian government and the Ethiopian government, especially the Ethiopian government, are pawns.
That's totally lying.
Okay, you can, whenever you have the chance, and of course I'm going to listen to you. I was saying that especially the Ethiopian government, this stuff, this decision-making is not made by Mr. Abiy Ahmed. Mr. Abiy Ahmed is just a stooge in a much wider project, basically aiming at kind of threatening Egypt all the time, disintegrating Egypt if possible, because of many other factors that are in play in the geopolitical arena here.
Bereket, would you like to respond?
I think there are several allegations that my friend has said. One of the things is Egypt is not really considering African Union as an institution, and then they have been going to Arab League, United Nations Security Council, and then even Greece to talk about Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which has never been an issue for them. And the other thing is Ethiopia has never been instructed by any other countries. Egypt knows this very well. There is no tradition in Ethiopia that other countries instruct what we do and what we don't do. Whether Israel is an enemy to Egypt or not is not our business. Our business is we are building this dam because it helps us very much, and then it helps Sudan, it helps also Egypt. We have also mentioned this very clearly, how it helps Sudan. Sudan has been in flood all over the summer. Now we are just reserving that water to avoid the flooding to Sudan. We have 12% of the total water annually is evaporated when it is reserved in Egypt, which we can save it because our dam is in highland area. There is no such huge number of loss of water. 12% of water is really a huge water. The other one is how much water is going out of Lake Nasser every year without being used by Egypt itself. What if we wisely use this water, discussing how much water we should release by what time, when Egypt needs the water? Technically, Ethiopia and Egypt can discuss without any dispute and then disagreement. We can use the water very effectively. However, Egypt is instructed by people like you, like to use military force and then use the water. I mean, this is completely unacceptable, and then it will not happen, because there is no countries that can really take military power to use one's resource and then become successful. UK has never been successful being powerful and then invaded Egypt for over many years, because Egyptian people fought to be free, okay? Nobody can do that to Ethiopia too. And then the other there are some storytellings that we are hearing also, that Arab countries gave Benshangul Gums to Ethiopia instead of building a dam on the area. This is also totally lie. Ethiopia is a very big country many years ago, and then this has happened. I mean, this is simply fairy tales that we hear now and then every time. Please stop recommending any military forces to be used in Ethiopia, which is totally a disaster, especially for Sudan. And then it does not also help Egypt, because you are talking about Nile, and we are talking about our river called Abai River. That river has many, many sources, and then it can be built more than 10 dams in every river that contributes to the Abai also. I mean, this should not be considered in a harmful way, and we have to be brotherly, discuss in African Union. There is no hunt to go to United States, United Nations Security Council, Arab League, European Union. They are not the ones who contribute the water. Just UN, Ethiopia, and Egypt. Even Egypt does not contribute.
If these discussions that I'm sure that there have been diplomatic relations between Ethiopia and Egypt over the last 10 years or more to try and resolve this crisis, if the two countries haven't resolved it, then of course other agencies, including the African Union, the Arab League, and now the UN Security Council,
we don't see any problem with that. But I think it's very important to realize the amount of compromise that Ethiopia has had to make for this dam. Ethiopia, for example, physically is able to fill the dam in only 2 years due to the amount of rainwater in the country. But Ethiopia has accepted an arrangement of a 6-stage filling process that takes from 4 to 7 years, just to accommodate the needs of downstream countries like Sudan and Egypt. It's not as if we're not willing to compromise. We're very much willing to compromise.
That's being neighbourly, isn't it? That's being neighbourly. They're being a good neighbour, sharing the resource.
Yes,
so you're not
countries are supposed to do. And this is not actually a problem of security. I know Egyptian governments wants to securitize the issue so that they can take it to escalate it to United Nations Security Council. But this is not a security issue as a whole. It is something that we have to arrange between ourselves so that we could both the Egyptian people and the Ethiopian people, the Sudanese people, as brothers, including all the 11 riparian countries, to come together to arrange a way of sharing equitably this huge resource that we have had.
So Mokhtar, across the region, as brothers, why hasn't this been able to be resolved? Why has it been necessary? And is it still necessary for others to help to resolve this impasse?
In fact, I mean, it has become necessary for this weak and underperforming Egyptian government, because the African Union did not solve the problem. In fact, I mean, what other concessions do our Ethiopian friends would like the Egyptian government to make, other than or more than just kind of giving up all historical rights and giving up all conventions and treaties that had preceded 2011, and that happened in 2019, as I indicated before. In fact, the Egyptian government has been trying here and there to solve the problem amicably in between neighbors, as the Ethiopian friends are saying. And I would like to remind them that anybody who would like to just listen to the clubhouse where there are rooms discussing that from the Ethiopian point of view, or the Ethiopian mass media, they're making it a national campaign. And as I said before, they're trying to create an external enemy, or even blow off the image of an enemy in order to try to support the shaky government of Mr. Abiy Ahmed. To say that we cannot go to the Security Council, we cannot go to the European Union, that's ridiculous, because why can't we? We have been in the African Union. The Ethiopian government has been saying that the Blue Nile is going to be an Ethiopian lake, and then they tell us that this is not a security issue. If it is a lake, an Ethiopian lake, then how come it is not a security issue? The Nile River is a cross-border Nile. It's the longest river in the world. And therefore, I think it is against the international law. But again, we can discuss that until tomorrow.
I would like to comment on that. How is it against
unfortunately, I'd love you to comment it as well, but unfortunately, gentlemen, we're right out of time. This discussion's been going on for more than 10 years already. We can't finish it today here on The Edge, but we can come to The Edge and look forward. I see that a former Turkish Minister of Agriculture and Forestry is being called in by all agencies to help negotiate. Let's hope that the Turkish experience can help bring all the countries together and find an equitable solution where everybody benefits. And it is the win-win situation that you hope for, Isaac, and our Egyptian friends as well can benefit from the Nile. Thank you for joining us this evening here on The Edge, all of you. So we've given both Ethiopian and Egyptian analysts the opportunity to reflect their thoughts on the ongoing Nile Dam dispute. Here's a roundup of what they had to say. The dam is now 80% complete and is expected to reach full generating capacity in 2023, making it Africa's largest hydroelectric power plant and the world's 7th largest. The dispute now centres on how quickly Ethiopia will fill and replenish the reservoir and how much water it releases downstream in case of a multi-year drought. Cairo and Khartoum have repeatedly called for the United States, the European Union and the United Nations to join the talks as mediators, while Cairo threatens with military action as a last resort. Of course, we'll keep an eye on the crisis and continue to look beyond the edge.